I'm Josh Swartz.
And I'm William Illingworth.
Hosts of the High Tech Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now.
Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others.
Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Coming up on episode 212 of the House of EdTech, we're going to talk about the Sneetches. You ever want to create easier step-by-step tutorials? I got a great recommendation for you. And does anybody really give a about what you think about EdTech? Strike up the band. Welcome to the House of EdTech. My name is Chris Nesi. The House of EdTech launched in 2014, giving me the opportunity to speak with teachers, leaders, and creators so you can more effectively integrate technology, strengthen your pedagogy, and have more confidence in your classroom and school so you can make an impact. Get involved with the podcast by visiting my website, chrisnesi.com. Using technology isn't difficult, and this is where it begins. This is the House of EdTech. And now that I've got your attention, welcome to this episode of the podcast. If you're a brand new listener, welcome. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. Got a great episode for you today. Got a lot of awesome things I'd like to share and talk about in this episode. Before I get to my EdTech thought, though, I'd like to remind you that coming up very soon, in just 3 more episodes, it's going to be episode 215, and it's time for the 2022 House of EdTech Smackdown. This is the final episode of the calendar year, and each year that I've been doing this podcast since 2014, that episode I turn over to you. So I am looking for your submissions. What have you loved in EdTech this year, 2022? Give me your best tip, recommendation, EdTech hack. Share something with the entire House of EdTech community. Episode 215 comes out later in December 2022, but I need your submission by Friday, December 9th, 2022. You're going to go to chrisnesi.com/voicemail, and you're going to send me a voicemail and tell me and the entire community what you have loved and enjoyed about EdTech this year. If you'd like to see other examples, in fact, you can see everything that's ever been shared on the EdTech Smackdown episodes. Thank you to Derek Larson for compiling this. Go out to chrisnesi.com/all-time smackdown and smush that all together. It's a great little Google sheet that Mr. Larson has prepared for us, and he willingly maintains. But the episode can't happen without your participation. So make sure you reflect on this year and send me your recommendation, your Smackdown submission. Again, Friday, December 9th is the deadline. Now, let's get on to this episode's EdTech Thought. So I don't know if I'd really be doing my job as the host of this podcast, covering education and technology the way I do, and ignored what is going on with Twitter. So in case you live under a rock, and I'm pretty sure you don't, you know that recently Elon Musk bought Twitter, and things might change about Twitter. And one of the things I saw that came out, and maybe you've seen it too, is this idea of being able to pay for a blue checkmark, to be able to pay money to become verified on Twitter. Now, I'll be honest with you, I have always wanted to become a verified Twitter user. I see lots of other educators who have acquired verified status, and maybe I'm shallow, maybe, I don't know what it is, but I've always thought it would be really cool to have one of those little blue check marks, and I have believed that having that check mark would give a little more weight and give you and what you say on Twitter just a little bit more validity. But then it comes out that Elon might put together this pay structure where anybody can pay to become a verified Twitter user and pay for the check mark. And I couldn't help but think, one, I'm never going to pay for it, so that's out of the question. So I will continue to be unverified if it's something you can pay for. Now, I think it is going to be pretty funny to see all types of people from all walks of life and professions pay for that Twitter verification and that blue check mark. And I think that is certainly going to happen. Now, if you're already verified, this kind of takes away from your Twitter verification, I think, because now anybody can get one. Now, you might be thinking, what's the point, Chris? What are we talking about here? Well, when I saw that it was going to be something you could potentially pay for, the first thing that came to mind was an old Dr. Seuss story, The Sneetches. Allow me to read a little excerpt from The Sneetches, and then I think we'll be on the same page. So here's an excerpt from The Sneetches and Other Stories by one Dr. Seuss. Then, quickly, Sylvester McMonkey McBean put together a very peculiar machine. And he said, "You want stars like the Star-Belly Sneetch? My friends, you can have them for $3 each. Just pay me your money and hop right aboard." So they clambered inside. Then the big machine roared. And it clunked, and it bonked, and it jerked, and it burked, and it bopped them about. But the thing really worked. When the plain belly Sneetches popped out, they had stars. They actually did. They had stars upon theirs. Don't be a star-bellied Sneetch. If you don't have a star upon thar or a blue check next to your name, it's okay. It's not worth paying for, in my opinion. And that's my EdTech thought. For this episode's recommendation, I'd like to talk briefly about a Chrome extension called Scribe, S-C-R-I-B-E. You can use the Scribe Chrome extension to automatically generate step-by-step guides for any process in seconds. This will allow you to spend less time explaining and more time doing. This Chrome extension generates an interactive screenshot and text description for each step in a process. You can easily create tutorials and guides that you can share with your colleagues. You can share directions with students. And this might be a great Chrome extension for you. It is the Scribe Chrome extension, and I will include a link for it, of course, in the show notes out at chrisnessy.com/212, or these show notes are a tap or a swipe away inside of your podcast player. And that's this episode's recommendation. At the very top of this episode, I asked a question, and that was, does anybody give a about what you think about EdTech? When your school or your district decides to invest in or make a new EdTech product or service available, the goal is to transform student learning. The goal is to add value to the student experience in the classroom. A goal might be to make part of your job easier. But where in the process do you fit in? If you're a teacher, what, if any, is your role in this process? And how much say do you, or should you have, in education technology decisions? I recently read an article from EdSurge, and the article was titled, "When It Comes to Picking EdTech, Are Schools Listening to Teachers?" And in this article, and I do have it linked in the show notes out at chrisnessy.com/212, or they're a tap or a swipe away, the article references a survey that was released earlier this year by the edtech company Clever. I'm in a district that uses Clever, It's a great single sign-on tool that instead of having students and sometimes teachers having to remember many passwords, it allows you to do some single sign-on to a number of apps and websites and services out there. But Clever, in a survey, found that 85% of administrators say that teachers are involved in choosing EdTech tools. When Clever asked the same question of teachers, more than 60% said they were hardly ever or never involved in those choices. So which is it? Do teachers have a voice in this process, or do we not have a voice? Do you have a seat at the table? Is there enough teacher voice in the EdTech selection process? In my experience, no, there's not. Why? Well, first, teachers aren't in a position to spend district resources, money, and sign contracts with vendors. At a fundamental level, this puts a gap between the companies and the teachers. Number two, when it comes to purchasing EdTech, the focus is usually on the tech and not the education. So your technology personnel are usually more involved because the people who understand the tech need to make sure it's going to work with your already existing systems and district technology. And then we can figure out if we can use it to teach. There needs to be a balance. But how do we find that balance? A major obstacle is that teachers, and I've been guilty of this, we don't always see the big picture or have a bird's eye view of the whole process. Think of things like data security, FERPA compliance, COPPA compliance. Schools and districts can easily involve teachers by doing things like running a pilot program before there is widespread adoption or implementation. Let teachers kick the tires with their students and ask teachers and students for feedback on a small scale. Now, to me, this makes perfect sense because at a basic level, people want to be heard and valued. And if technology is just being mandated, then, well, teachers don't feel heard. And again, in my own experience, I don't feel all that valued. And speaking of mandates, that's not always the best idea. Making everyone use one specific tool isn't always good for everyone. Choice and options are powerful. Now, with things like student information systems and learning management systems, yes, as a district or a school, make a decision, keep everybody on the same page. But if we're going to force everybody to use Nearpod or we're going to force everybody to use Pear Deck, then we're missing out on some things. So mandates aren't always the best. So who should get a say in what's going on? Typically, it's the people who are out of the classroom who have the most say. Administrators, technology people, central office folks. Sometimes that's completely valid. There are plenty of organizations, certifications, and degrees that can give a person the knowledge to make those decisions and have a lot of pull in those conversations. But a person who is all book smart and not street smart, and by street smart, I mean you got to have probably at least 5 or more years classroom experience. If you don't have that and you've climbed the ladder, I'm sorry. No, I'm not sorry. Your opinion and your point of view doesn't hold as much water than somebody who has been in the classroom, designed lessons, worked with students for an extended period of time to evaluate tools, and has a really good handle on what would work for teaching and for student learning. Technology can make a teacher's life easier, but it will never replace us, and there is no magic pill that will solve all the EdTech issues. So beware, be cautioned of those that sell this brand of EdTech like snake oil. And let's not forget about teachers who not only do you not have a say or a voice in education technology, but you're being left behind. Another key challenge is that schools and districts often make their purchases meant to support all teachers, even though the needs of teachers vary widely by subject matter and grade level. I'm talking to phys ed teachers here. Can you think of another subject area that benefits less from education technology in your district? It might even be true that there is more technology available to assist a PE teacher than any other subject area. Follow the bouncing ball. Can you imagine a Peloton lab in your middle school or high school where students could differentiate their fitness based on their individual health goals and needs? Is the technology and software and hardware not readily available to do that for the physical education needs of our students? We have the ability to easily collect health and fitness data, but when was the last time the Phys Ed department was involved in the EdTech decision process or is even really considered? This is just an example of how certain teachers and certain subjects are being left behind. How do we collaborate? How do we change the starting point? How do we rewrite this narrative? Well, if you're in a small school setting, then it's really easy to get everyone's opinion. But what if you're in a district with 12 schools, 1,500 teachers, over 10,000 students, or something bigger than that? Teacher buy-in has to come from the ground up. Every content area needs to have a voice and advocate for their needs. School and district officials need to work with their classroom teachers and talk openly and honestly about their EdTech needs. We have committees for just about everything. So if there isn't one, there should be an education technology related committee in each school that has a seat at the table, and each person is valued in the EdTech selection process. What is the EdTech selection process like for you? What role do you get to play in this process where you are based on your role in education? I want to know. Let's collect these stories and let's find out what's working. Send me an email. Option 1, feedback@chrisnessy.com. Option 2, send me a voicemail, chrisnessy.com/voicemail. Let's keep this conversation going, and hopefully we can change what's happening when choosing education technology in our classrooms and schools. This is the Just Give It a Try segment of the show where I'd like to turn it over to you, and I do have something that somebody submitted, but I want to share something that you should try. I recently tried this in my classroom with students who were making presentations, and my students had a choice for a recent project to either use Google Slides or to use Canva to design and make presentations on some topics. Students who used Canva, I told them about this when they were doing their presentations, and they were pretty intrigued, and they integrated this into their Canva presentations, and these are Canva magic shortcuts. These are keys you can hit while presenting a presentation from Canva, and fun, interesting things can happen during your presentation. For example, well, here are all the examples. If during a full screen Canva presentation you do the following, these things will happen. If you hit B on your keyboard, it will blur the current slide. And then if you hit B again, it will unblur it. If you hit letter C, you will get confetti that pops up on your screen. And if you really go to town hitting the C key, you are going to have all sorts of confetti type fireworks on your screen. Letter D, you get a drum roll animation and a drum roll sound effect. When you hit the letter D again, it ends the drum roll and the little graphic goes away. Letter M, you get a little mic drop animation, which can add a little something to a presentation. If you hit the letter O, you're going to get floating bubbles that kind of pop and go up on the screen. Little tough to see, but still kind of cool. Letter Q, you'll get a little quiet emoji that goes shh, okay? So also cool. The letter U will do a curtain call animation where on the last slide, let's say, or at the beginning, a curtain will close, and then if you hit the letter U again, the curtain will open, and you can continue with a presentation at the beginning or use it to end a presentation. And then if you hit any number, 0 through 9, you'll get a timer, 1 for 1, 2 for 2, etc. You can also press Shift and the / or question mark on your keyboard, and that will open the Magic Shortcuts menu. So the next time you or your students are using Canva to present, consider trying out Magic Shortcuts. Next, got this question on Twitter, and the question came to @House of EdTech, and it came from Chris Lister @Mr_Lister, and I'll have that out in the show notes. And he said, "Hey Chris, I'm a teacher librarian in a K-5 school and a beginner podcaster with kids in school. Last year, we created an internal podcast, but this year, we feel like we can branch out. What free service would you use for interviewing remote guests?" First, Chris, thank you for the question. Thank you for sending it to @House of EdTech on Twitter. And I have two answers for you. Number one, you can use Zencastr, Zencastr, and you can use that for free to connect remote guests. Number two, you can check out podcastle.ai. The website is podcastle.ai, and both can be used to record people who are in different locations, but capture the audio for your hosts and remote guests. I hope those two recommendations help you, Chris, and if you who is listening is also interested in doing some podcasting with your students, be sure to also check out Zencastr and podcastle.ai. And now it's time for the House of EdTech VIP, and I want to give a big hello and shout out to Ashley Gable from Birmingham, Alabama. Ashley is on Twitter. She is @AshleyGableEDU, and I'll have a link to that out in the show notes, chrisnessy.com/212, or they are a tap or a swipe in the app you're using right now. Ashley is a technology integration specialist, a DLP coach, a lover of literature, organization, and crafting. But most importantly, or pretty importantly, she is passionate about teaching and learning. And you should connect with Ashley because she is the House of EdTech VIP. Thanks for listening to this episode of the House of EdTech podcast. If you're not subscribed or following, I hope you'll continue to make this podcast a part of your anytime, anywhere professional development. Let's keep the conversation going about your role in EdTech selection. Go to the show notes page, chrisnessy.com/212, or you can send an email by going to chrisnessy.com/feedback, or, and I prefer it, a voicemail, chrisnessy.com/voicemail, to let me know your thoughts on this topic or anything else that's on your mind or other episodes you've listened to. We can circle back to anything in the previous 211 episodes. If you enjoy the House of EdTech, do me a favor. Actually, two favors. Number one, tell somebody else about the podcast. Word of mouth is the absolute best way to show your appreciation for what I do. Share the podcast with a friend or a colleague who would also get value from listening. Number two, consider becoming an awesome supporter. I am very thankful for those who are getting value from the show and giving back on a regular basis. Thank you to Catherine Abdallah, Brian Carpenter, Erin Cummings, Dan Gallagher, Peggy George, Jeff Herb, Mike Messner, Matt Miller, Patty Reifus, Lori Simpson, and Kyle Wilcox. If you're getting value from the House of EdTech and you want to give back and support the show, go to chrisnessy.com/awesome. The next episode of the show is going to be episode 213, and as I'm recording this, I'm in for a whirlwind 2 weeks. On Saturday, November 19th, we've got the 9th Ed Camp New Jersey, which I am the lead organizer for. If you're going to be at Ed Camp New Jersey, can't wait to see you there. If you haven't registered yet, go out to edcampnewjersey.net, and New Jersey is all spelled out for you. And that's kind of it. Very exciting. You know, Rutgers courses are going well. Jackie, the student teacher, is having a ball, and I am focused on getting a great Ed Camp for people in New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania. That's it. Until next time. Thank you for learning with me. Oh, you know what I forgot? Here's what I forgot. Smackdown. Get me your recommendation by December 9th. chrisnessy.com/voicemail. Thanks for learning with me, and until next time. Using technology isn't difficult. Just give it a try.